So our first portion is what is being proposed. And this will go into some of the policies and regulations that are highlighted in that specific plan. So the plan update would allow substantial new development in the area. This table shows the maximum amount of various types allowed under the existing 2013 plan, and two alternatives being considered. As you can see, scenario 1 would double the amount of office and research and development space compared to the current plan, along with adding 515 new housing units and more than doubling community and civic space. Scenario 2 would add another 500,000 square footage of office and R&D space and 250 housing units to the scenario 1 total. In response to community concerns about local impacts on housing displacement, traffic, local jobs and amenities, sea level rise, contamination, and East Palo Alto's environments and natural resources, City Council already eliminated a third scenario that would have allowed more than 4 million square footage of office and research and development space. So based on community feedback, the draft was also revised to allow for more housing, creating transition zones between new development and existing residential and shoreline open space areas, creating a framework for allowing growth that ties extra footage to community benefit priorities. So why is the city considering so much growth? So growth can have a lot of consequences for the community, so it's important to understand that it's all about trade-offs. Development is one of the ways for cities to fund local improvements and get them built. And developers have to pay impact fees. And developers won't build unless they can still turn a profit despite these fees and constraints imposed by the city. So the city has to find that sweet spot where they can get the most out of the developers without chasing them away. So the community also has to decide whether these benefits are worth the cost of enduring impacts that can't be fully mitigated. So city staff is recommending the bigger scenario, which would be scenario 2, because it better accommodates the level of development interest, which allows the city to extract more public benefits. Within the specific plan, the land use chapter lays out what types of uses can go where and sets development standards and policy guidelines to manage how projects are designed and how to mitigate impacts. So listed here, color-coded as number 1, we have Four Corners, which would be an active urban downtown for the whole city. Under number 2 in orange is Bay Road Central Core, which is shown here on the map. It would be a community serving nonprofit, medical, and local business core, anchored around a lively central segment with residential and retail uses. And highlighted in blue, which is the waterfront office. It is planned for high-tech and higher intensity job districts with active ground floors and ample public spaces. And right here in the purple is the Ravenswood Employment Center, which would include middle intensity job districts with a mix of employment supporting land uses. And lastly, here in gray, it will be a lower tech and lower intensity job district that offers middle income employment and a mix of production and warehousing spaces. And down here in this brown color, the city plans for multifamily housing intended for planned area residents and workers that serves as a transition between the employment uses and existing neighborhoods. Based on resident feedback, the building heights will step down from the tallest near the bay to shorter near existing housing. New buildings facing the bay are tallest at 8 stories high, but also step down to 4 to 5 stories facing the public bay trail along the bayfront. And with this, I want to remind everyone that this is the max permissible height. Similarly, transition zones are going to be used for protecting the existing character, privacy, and access to sunlight for existing homes, especially in University Village. To reduce impacts on existing housing, new development must be placed further from the property baseline, which is known as a setback distance. And it's required to start out shorter and step back as it gets taller to create a softer transition. And this map shows a little bit more of those transition zones. The blue and purple diagonals along the bay waterfront show the height step backs, which are those 4 stories and 6-story buildings. And these view corridors, shown in thick, solid lines, are to preserve views of the bay between the new taller buildings near the bay. The planning also includes design standards and guidelines to make sure tall buildings won't entirely block off the bay view. And the city is also a funding partner and is working closely with the San Francisquito Creek Joint Powers Authority, also known as the JPA, on the Safer Bay Flood Protection Project. That project is separate from the specific plan and moving through the planning process on a different timeline. But regardless, it will have a significant impact on shoreline development within the plan area. So this solid blue line on this map shows the location preferred by the JPA and the city's design team for the flood protection levee. And this solid red line located here is where a flood wall is needed because there isn't enough space for a levee. And this star located here would be used to release stormwater into the bay so it doesn't get trapped on the inland of the levee. There's also this dotted dark blue line and green lines that show alternative levee locations offered by a developer, which is listed as the Emerson Collective, the property owners for the area at the top of this map. And we'll briefly talk about their proposed alternative later in the presentation. And new development will also be required to be built on higher ground in order to account for future sea level rise. So this map shows how much the ground level must be raised for new development in these areas. And this requirement will reduce risk for new buildings in the RBD, but it does not address flood risk for the surrounding areas outside of this plan.